Okay, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. And as you all know, I love to have guests with me on the podcast that have incredible business stories. And I'm really, really excited. I've got a fantastic guest who's going to share so many insights. He's got a book due to launch. He'll tell you a bit more about that over the course of the podcast called, I believe, Imposter Millionaire is the book that's coming out in a few months' time. But look, I've been wanting to get this guy on the podcast for a little while. A guy called Andrew Scott. Andrew is the CEO of the Ascot Group. Built, I believe, numbers 15. I think it's 15, 7 or 8 figure businesses. He's a keynote speaker and a man that's just knows how to make businesses successful, but has done that from, maybe he would also say himself as well, some times when he's had some times when it wasn't going as well as he wanted it to. So look, great honour to have you on the podcast, Andrew. Welcome.
Yeah, delighted to be here, James. Thanks for the invitation.
And have I missed anything in that introduction? I've tried to sort of give a bit of an overview. You've done a lot of stuff over the course of the last few years in business, haven't you? So I mean, but you're involved in so many different things. I mean, just out of interest, what was your when did your passion for business sort of ignite?
I think, well, first of all, I left Ireland when I was 18 and landed in London. And for anybody who is perhaps a little bit older, they may remember some of the challenges in Northern Ireland during the period of the Troubles. So I think, that was the environment that I grew up in, which was quite aggressive, violent. And when I landed in London when I was 18, it was like Disney World to me. So there was so much opportunity, there was so much to see and do. And there was nobody waiting for you on the street corner with a gun in their hand. So this was just an unbelievable opportunity. And one of the things for me that I couldn't understand why at 18, why other kids my age in London weren't seizing all this opportunity. And they were just doing what they were doing. They were going to the pub, they were playing their computer games. And I had this fire and passion in me because here was the land of opportunity. Here was Disney World.
And I guess, and you've turned Disney World into a very big Disney World, basically, in terms of what you've achieved over the course of the last few years.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, obviously history, and we'll talk a lot about, you've got the book coming out, which I want to, and obviously I've known you from the Ascot Group and what the companies that you've got there. But your journey over that time, did you, when you came over then, I guess you didn't necessarily have any mentors or anyone that you could sort of go and, so how did you go about, you obviously had that desire to sort of be successful and to see this opportunity, but it is also difficult for people. And a lot of people listening to this will be at that early stage maybe, or at that stage of building a business. It is still a challenge. How did you, I know I've read some of your podcasts and watched some of your podcasts all about learning, but what did you do to sort of try and build up your skills and knowledge initially at that stage? What was key for you?
Well, I think at that age, at 18, 19, you don't have any money. And certainly when I landed in London, I had clearly no money, I had no connections, I had dropped out of school, so I had no education. The one thing that I could do was read. And so I became a prolific reader of what we'd now call self-help books, but Stephen Covey's, Brian Tracy's, Tony Robbins, all the greats. And I read their books, and that introduced me to a different world of possibility. So I think actually it was, I didn't have the money to book seminars or anything of that nature, but I could read these books. And back in those days, you had cassette players. Do you remember them, James?
I do. I remember my dad having a Jim Rohn. Do you remember Jim Rohn?
Yes,
so
Jim Rohn.
Tony Robbins' mentor. So I remember my dad having a Jim Rohn cassette. So I definitely remember cassettes. But there we go. I'm a bit old.
So so I just filled my brain with this stuff, this content. And one of the things that I talk to people about a lot is how your environment shapes your outcome. And I think if I hadn't have left Belfast when I did, I dread to think where I would be now. But, I changed the environment. I went from Ireland to London. And then your environment isn't just your location. It's the people you surround yourself with. It's the content that you consume. It's who you listen to. It's the news. So I learned at a very young age to fill my mind with really positive, inspiring material. And I think that gave me that fire in the belly to want to build and create. And in those days, I didn't have the connections or money, but what I could do was work hard. And I figured out that I would make that my superpower. And I finally got a job when I landed in England. It took me a while, but finally got a job. And it was a junior role. I was 18. And what I could do was outwork everybody. And that was my approach. So I joined as the office junior, order processing on a computer. But to learn that business, I ended up going in on a Saturday morning, learning about the business, going into the factories, the production cycles, staying late at night, getting in early. And I was fanatical about learning my trade of what I was employed to do. And simply that got noticed. So a couple of managers noticed it. And then finally the MD noticed it and said, right, I know you're young, but we're going to promote you. And that started a methodology for me, which is whatever I would do it 110%. And we live in a culture now where people just turn up for a job, go home again. And it's such a shame because you immerse yourself in something, you become good at it. And when you become really good at something, it tends to be a joy. You enjoy it because you're good at it. So I was then able to, over the next couple of years, build a really good, probably corporate career in and taking that mentality. So I learned finance, I learned marketing, I learned sales, and I applied it to whatever business that I was working on until eventually I got my big break, probably when I was in my late 20s.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that big break in a moment, actually, and that. But you touched on something there, which I totally and utterly resonate. Maybe where we sound like old white, old white pale stale men saying this, but I'm the same. When I started my career, and when I left you, it was to grind. It was to hard. I had to work, and the opportunity was there, but it wasn't that you had to take it. You had to take it with both hands, and it was right. It was, and I see a little bit of and this concept of. I remember an old manager saying to me once, "Don't be an 801." And I said, "What do you mean, be an 801?" He said, "Don't be the person that leaves, that is in the office for 8 hours, and then 1 minute, either side.
Yeah.
1 minute, you get in 1 minute before, and you leave at 1 minute after, and suddenly your day's done. Commit to being there, and commit to doing what the job needs to be done to get done."
Yeah.
How do you think? Maybe it's an interesting question to start off with, and maybe as we'll talk about business and how. What's happened? Why has that changed, or is it still the case? It is still the right way forward, but many people just don't want to do it. I mean, because it feels like we are in a position where people don't want to do stuff like that a lot of the time, isn't it? Now,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of factors. I think COVID was a major turning point in this, but I think even before that, social media has probably got a lot to answer for here, which is saying that get rich quick, it's easy to make money, and the concept of actually working for it is why do we need to work for it? All I do is become an influencer. All I need to do is become a celebrity and post stuff on social media, and I'll get successful. I'll get wealthy. And the reality is that's for the 0.001% of the population. The people that are wealthy, that create success, are people that have worked really, really hard for it.
Yeah, no, agree totally. And as I always say to people, again, all the stuff you do, it's also, there's no shortcuts to success, right? We've unfortunately been given this route where it's easy, and we live in an our world, don't we, where things are immediate. It's, especially in the areas that I focus on in sales. I talk to a lot, train with hundreds of salespeople, and I always say, you start your work today for what's happening in 3-4 months' time, and if you don't do that work now, you're not going to get those results. But talking about, you mentioned about sort of growing into sort of sales, marketing, finance, and sales. Can you remember, obviously, when you were in that role, the first sales that you did and the first sales you brought in, and how, because sales is the lifeblood of every business, how it made you feel, and how did, can you remember sort of those moments of your sort of first few sales?
I do very vividly, actually, James, because I was in this role in this manufacturing business, and it was an operational role, and that was in London, and I was struggling to buy somewhere to live at the time. I wanted to buy, and I couldn't afford it. So an opportunity arose to move up north to Yorkshire, where property was a lot cheaper, and I was able to use the skills that I had previously to join a similar business, but in a sales role. So in that particular business, they said, "Look, great, you've got an operational background, you understand the product and manufacturing. Let's put you in a sales role." And I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And again, because I think I applied this philosophy of I'll just outwork everybody, I would be in the car at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. I would get to my first appointment. It might be the other end of the country, but I would get there for 9 o'clock or 9:30. And what I did was I set myself a target, which is I would get to an appointment early at the other end of the country, and I would make another appointment late in the day. And that meant I was stuck there during the middle of the day, and I went out cold calling. I went out knocking doors. So that was my approach. So I didn't have the sales skill, but I just had that ability. Look, do you want to buy my product?
Yeah.
Um, and what happened actually was I ended up getting resentment from the rest of the sales team because I was 19, 20 years old. They were 45 and they were set in their ways. They were leaving home at 8:30 in the morning, getting to an appointment for, 11 o'clock. And I'd done a day's work before they were even on the road. So this got noticed, and then I then ended up getting promoted and building again that career trajectory again. And I didn't honestly know what I was doing. I had had no sales training, but I knew the product and I was really passionate about the product. And then, yeah,
Since you mentioned, sorry to interrupt you there, Bill. You mentioned that you knew you had no training, but you were passionate about the product, and you knew the product. And I think that's those two
yeah,
things again in any business situation are so critical. And again, a lot of people listening to this are very business owners as well as people that sell for a living. And I say to people, if you can't be enthused by what you're selling, if you don't want to get your own wallet out and purse out and buy the thing, then why should someone else want to? And it's funny, isn't it? Because you do see a lot of I see a lot of business people, and they don't look particularly bothered about selling themselves. So and it's like that energy and enthusiasm to promote what they do isn't there. So it's interesting, isn't it? That that was one of the things, even though you didn't have that training, that got you through and got your
yeah,
business.
yeah. And it was interesting because that was a new skill that I had learned. And so I had an operational background and then moved in and developed a sales background. And it was as a result of those two elements that I got my big break later on because I was able to apply both of those to a really distressed business.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about the big break then, and obviously because I know that it was also a bit of a journey, wasn't it? From reading the story, you had the big break, and there was also some setbacks along the way. So tell people about that, how that
Yeah.
break opened up.
Well, I think up until that point, I had developed a bit of a reputation of being very good at turnarounds. So I was able to go into businesses, help them improve, help them grow. And so I had the opportunity, well, I was parachuted into a company in West Wales, and it was a distressed business. They were about a million turnover business with much bigger capacity, but their supplier had effectively screwed them over. And as a result of that, this business now ended up in a distressed state because of a supplier contract. And so I was very fortunate enough to be able to go in, work with the directors, turn the business around, and then we grew that from a million annual turnover to 12 million in 36 months. And that
Wow.
business was then acquired by Masco, which is a US Fortune 500 company, about 9 billion turnover. So it was a huge success, lots of media around it. And and unfortunately for me, the whole event and the lead up to that uh, perhaps gave me a bit of an inflated ego of what I was capable of. So I went from there and I went immediately out. We cashed in, I've made some money, and then I acquired another business really quickly. And I hadn't done my due diligence on that business. And it faced two challenges. One, I knew it was struggling, I knew it was losing money. And what I hadn't forecast is about 12 or 14 weeks after acquiring that business, 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And I'm now running a struggling business that was heavily dependent on consumer spending, high ticket consumer spending. And the tap went off
Yeah.
when 9/11 happened. So the business was decimated as a result. And the challenge that I had when I acquired that business, I put all my own money into it and I had taken out some bank um, funding as well. And the bank then foreclosed on that. And I ended up having a domino effect where I lost the business, I lost my home, I ended up with £100,000 in credit card debt. And the only thing I had in my name was a clapped out old BMW.
And I remember I was going to say the post I've seen, which is one of your most famous LinkedIn posts. If anyone sees it, is the BMW on the beach, isn't it? Basically.
Yes, yeah, yeah. But at the time, it was devastating because, I had been very successful. I had made a lot of money. I had done an incredible turnaround, sold it to, a £9 billion company. And here I was a couple of years later, losing everything and pretty much almost homeless.
I want to come back to that in a second, because obviously that's a dramatic life experience, and again it shows that again where you are now to where you were, that people can come back and come from that. But that growth you drove from that 1 million to 12 million, what were obviously there's the you went in and had, what were the key components? A lot of people would listen to this and go, well, I want to do that with my business. And what were there any sort of two or three things that were really pivotal in that first process, as well as I'm sure you've used in your other businesses, that were key to sort of driving that growth with that company?
Yeah. I think that there was, James, and I think it was the background before that, and where I had the opportunity, because of some of the roles that I had the opportunity to test different blueprints and test
Yeah,
different frameworks.
yeah.
I, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed testing different marketing models, different sales approaches, and I really developed a couple of frameworks. One of those is attract, convert, retain, um, ACR, and it's a really simple model where um, it's attract, which is lead generation or quotes or estimates, convert, which is from inquiry to sales pitch and to customer onboarding, and then customer retention. So it's really simple. It's what everybody does. Generate leads, convert them to customers, and then do a really good job of looking after your customers so they refer you or buy again. But actually, what is a really simple model? Very few businesses metric or monitor. So in my business now and back then, and what I teach, I've worked with over 1,000 entrepreneurs over the years. What I've discovered is that hardly anybody measures those three elements consistently. So, how many leads have we had in today, or estimates, or quotes, or inquiries? What is our conversion rate from inquiry to pitch, demo, presentation, whatever it is? What's our conversion from demo to customer or to sale? And very few people measure customer retention, customer satisfaction. And there is a framework around customer retention. So very few people metric those. And what I've discovered is that the companies who aren't growing are not doing one of those very well. It just comes down to one of those.
It's such a quite. Oh, sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So no, so that was the model then that I approached to that particular business to grow it from 1 million to 12 million.
Amazing, and it's such a great point. And there's the great saying: is it what you can't manage, what you can't measure? And I see it again a lot in a sales environment where people will say to me, "Well, and the first thing I'll say to them is, we're not growing." And I tend to work in a number of different businesses and things are happening. I'll say, "Okay, well, what's the reason for it? Where's the starting point?" And again, you say, your audit goes in and you're putting your finger on it and you're saying, "Okay, well, what's the target? Where do we want to get? Okay, well, I want to get to here, but I'm at here. Okay, well, how many have you got in your? Well, you've got 10 leads in your pipeline. Your pipeline's a quarter of what the target's going to be. Okay, well, we've got a problem in attracting in your model, for example. Or actually, no, we've got loads of leads coming in. We've got loads of hot leads coming in, but we don't convert them. Okay, well, we've got a problem in the way we engage with those leads. So, like you say, it's something simple, but it's true. Is a lot of businesses don't tend to do that sort of stuff right now. Were you really uber disciplined about looking at, and still are, I'm guessing, in terms of looking at those numbers and reviewing them weekly, monthly, and making sure they were sort of the lifeblood of your sort of KPIs as a business owner and a business leader?
No, it absolutely is. It's I think every founder, owner, manager needs to have a CEO dashboard, and that needs to be your cash flow. It needs to be your cash balances. It needs to be your debtors. So I get a report at 9:15 every morning, a financial report. Where are we? Debtors, bank balances, and cash flow. And but I've also got my CEO dashboard, which tells me yesterday, month to date, year to date, how many inquiries, estimates, quotes, whatever, however it sort of works, depending on the type of business conversions. So I think that's crucial. I mean, there's more to it than that. That's the
Simplified version.
framework that you need to do. Setting above that, there is another element which is around how committed are you to actually achieving this? Because what I find is a lot of business owners come to me and say, I want to grow from 10 million to 12 million. And I say, well, how committed are you to that? And yeah, well, no, I really want to do it. Well, okay, what are you prepared to sacrifice to get it? What are you prepared to invest to get it? What are you prepared to commit to relentlessly to achieve that? And quite often they say, well, I don't know, I just quite like the idea of, another couple of million on my top line. So I think it is, there's more to it than just attract, convert, retain. You've got to have that absolute desire and commitment to get there in the first place.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting point actually. One of the things I'll pick up on my last question this area before we get back to the sort of the BMW on the beach thing, which I think is a great sort of a lot of the time, a lot of business owners, like you say, want success, but they get into a bit of a lull, right? Life's good. They've sort of got a decent enough income coming in, and they've got things. Life's okay, right? But one of the interesting things, and it's interesting, especially as you've sold businesses and built and exited businesses, as I say to people now, if you want your business to be valuable to someone else, you've got to have that engine. You've got to have that sales and marketing engine that shows the leads coming in and then being delivered and converted. And I mean, I guess you'd agree with, maybe not, maybe you tell me otherwise, but it's, when you sold the businesses you have, you're selling futures, right? As much as you're selling the present. So you're selling what that looks like for people to come.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the there's multiple reasons that somebody buys your business, and one of the strongest ones that I've found is your brand. So when I sold Business Leader, my media and publishing company, we sold that for 32 times its EBITDA, which is, it's a huge number. And the reason for that was the buyer wasn't looking so much at the numbers. The buyer was looking at, what can I do with this brand?
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful brand, Business Leader, and what could I do with that? And so it was about the reputation, it was about the reach of the brand, it was about the network of the brand. So it was less about what the revenue numbers were or profitability was. It was more about the brand itself, and I think that gets overlooked. Actually, if you're looking to build eventually to exit, you should build in brand all the way through it.
Yeah, amazing. Love it. So I want to talk about, Business Leader. I want to talk about Ascot Group and Perplex and all the others. But talk to us about that moment when, the BMW on the beach moment, when you've built this successful career, you've had all the trappings of success, and then it all goes. Because again, there'll be people listening to this who are probably maybe going through a tough time, have had a tough moment, whatever else, and they'll look at you and go, oh, well, I'd love to be in your position. But what describe that sort of time in your life, and what was the point where you went, now I've got to change this, and how you started those steps to change that?
I think, the first point is, the reality is, it is one of the most difficult periods in any founder or entrepreneur's life when they lose that, because you lose yourself to a degree as well, because you're not just losing a business or your home, it's how you are as a human, and how you feel about yourself and your self-worth. And what I discovered then is the people who were around me disappeared very quickly. My friends disappeared, my business associates disappeared. My bank managers went from being my best friends to, everything by formal registered post letter. I mean, everything changed. The turning point for me actually was sitting on that beach in that old car at the time, because I thought, well, I'm going to have to do something. And I reflected very heavily on the fact that I had two young sons, and I had to be an example to them. And I had to have them see me fail, but get back up again and keep going. And because, what they would see at that point would affect them for the rest of their life as well. So I think in that moment, sat on that beach, I thought, look, I have got to turn this around. I've got to do something. Now, the problem was, I had this clapped out old car. At this point, I'd lost my home. I was living in a horrible little flat, and I had £100,000 in credit card debt. So I couldn't go and build another proper business. But what I did have was myself and my time. And what I had did previously very successfully was help other people grow their business. So I set myself up as a consultant, then, and I I went around the country. I met lots of business owners, and I sold myself. Let me come in, help you turn around your business or grow your business. And I developed a framework then, which then became my company, which is Perplex. And Perplex, Purplex, is an acronym. Stands for Purpose, Plan, Execute. And so I developed this framework, Purpose, Plan, Execute. So I would go into a business and say, okay, let's focus on where you are now, where you want to get to. What does it look like when you're finished? Um, then let's develop a plan to help you achieve it. And then success is in the execution. So that was the high level framework that I would set. So that was strategic. And then operational was attract, convert, retain. So one was strategic, one was operational. And I ended up traveling around the country. I ended up doing 250,000 miles on that old car until eventually the engine blew up and I had to pay somebody to take it away. But by then I was on that journey, and then Perplex grew. I realized that as a consultant, you're exchanging time for money. And one of the challenges for me is, well, how am I ever going to scale this business, pay back the debt that I was in? And I then had to take more risks. So I employed somebody, I employed an assistant, and then over the next couple of years that grew. And Perplex then pivoted really from a consultancy business to a more of a strategic marketing partner. And since then we've done over 70 million in revenue, and scaled, 90 or 100 people.
Like I said, well, and you're a powerhouse in the marketing space. I know I'll talk to you about the area, because I know you've done a lot of work in the construction and sort of renewable space, and that's an area that you guys pretty
Yeah,
own much from a marketing
yeah,
perspective,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is which is great.
Yeah.
So it's obviously building back up the other side. I guess there probably was some moments where you felt sorry for yourself there. There are one of the things I always say when I've had a bad day, and we all have. Some days you're the dog, some days you're the lamppost, as Pete Trigo always says to me, and I always laugh when Pete says that. But you are these. How do because I guess you still, one of the things as well, and I'm thinking about the book you've got, which is about Imposter Millionaire, which is actually one of the challenges a lot of business owners face, is they do feel a bit of an imposter sometimes. Even when you had your good days, you get bad things that set you back. How did you sort of, did you build any techniques personally to overcome some of those elements? Because you have your knowledge and skills, but even so, you might have had setbacks and knockbacks. Is there anything you share that's helped you from a personal perspective when people are, when you have those tough moments?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. The first one is recognizing that failure is part of life,
Yeah.
and sadly, most people don't even try.
Yeah.
So I think, not pat yourself on the back would be too strong, but recognize the fact that you've had a go is better than what most people have done. And also recognize that the other people in the room, quite often I'll be in a room with, through Business Leader, I met several billionaires, several, very high profile celebrities. And you recognize that actually they're just going through the same stuff. They've got their family problems, they've got their financial problems, except it's billions rather than thousands. And once you start to become comfortable with that, and I think the key to me is to be really authentic, is no smoke and mirrors. This is who I am. This is what I've done. This is what I've done well. This is what I haven't done well. But I'm really comfortable being authentic. And I think particularly, imposter syndrome is absolutely real. I've suffered with it for many years. I'll never forget one family member telling me once, Andrew, who do you think you are? You forgot where you came from, growing up in Belfast in a council house. And that hurts, and actually I reflected on that, and I turned it around and said, well, it's because of where I came from that I'm building and creating and doing what I'm doing. That's the reason I'm doing it, because I want to leave that world behind.
Yeah.
So, I think once you've gone through that, and I think it's just being really authentic and not putting on a front, being yourself and recognizing that, I've screwed up, but boy, did those people in the room, did they also screw up? They may not want to talk about it, but they definitely did.
Such a good point, and I'm so glad you said this, because I'll share this. I'm going to share the heck out of this on on a post. there's a great image I use in presentations, which was Lev Yachty, I think his name is, and he says, my first business I failed, I wasn't very good at it. My second business I wasn't very good at either. Third business I did a bit better, but wasn't that great. Fourth business I failed. Fifth business was PayPal. And it's sort of like everyone goes and says, there's a multi-billionaire that's and they forget the fact they had four failures. People forget the fact that James Dyson tried 270 odd times to do the thing for the Dyson Hoover, and everyone sees him now and thinks he's a billionaire, and they assume that success is this is this trajectory thing, and it's not. It's full of the ups and downs, isn't it?
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes me sad is that the UK and America, the difference between the two. In America, they celebrate entrepreneurship, they celebrate sales people, and they celebrate failure. And the fact is, you had a go, it didn't work, get up again and go again. You'll get better next time. Whereas in the UK, sadly, we tend to have a negative view of anybody who's tried and failed.
You're right, and I don't know if you've heard of it. Apologies for those of the language, but it's actually called. I did it because again, I met you through a business that I had previously before, which didn't fairly totally, but didn't go quite the way I wanted it to. And I did a presentation. I don't know if you've heard of the Fuck Up Club. Basically, have you ever heard of it? So
I spoke at one.
good. I'm glad you've done it because I did the same thing. Because I spoke at the one at Bristol with Dave. It's Dave. I can't remember his name.
Dave Gilroy.
Dave Milroy, that's right. Yeah, so I spoke at the one in Bristol, and I shared a story of where, I'd built my, as you may remember, I had built a software business up in 2005 that I started that grew to a certain level, and then didn't quite go the way I wanted it to at the end. But again, from mistakes that you make, and it's like you're right, celebrate them, own them, be able to learn from them, and be able to look back and say, actually, here's what I've done differently, and here's what I changed as a result of it. I think it's such a great point to say to celebrate.
It is. And one of the things to take away from that is the failures that I've had have massively positively helped shape the positives that I now have. So for example, one of the reasons I lost that business some years ago was in part because it was a distressed business, in part because 9/11 turned the tap off, but I slowly recovered from that. But the final nail in the coffin was a battle over a dilapidations claim made by a pension fund who owned the building that I was occupying.
Right.
And when it was time to move out, when the lease came to an end, we got hit with a huge dilapidations claim. And the problem was they were demolishing the site. So the dilapidations claim was based around returning the building to as good as new condition, but they were demolishing it. But it didn't matter. Yeah, and they went to court and they won because they're a multi-billion pension fund and I was this little guy, so I lost. So at the time that was hard. That was unbelievable hard because all my money had gone now. I had bank funding, everything. I'm battling this legal case. Just managed to turn the business around into profitability, and then it all went. My lesson from that is now I don't rent, I own. So I don't take long-term onerous leases. So everything that I've done now is I acquire a site, an office, a building, and then I occupy it. And that's then enabled me as a side hustle to go on and build a multi-million-pound property portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah, which is sort of, you've got a number of strings to your bow. That's one of the things that you enjoy sort of doing as well of it. Just quickly talking about go back to the UK part, and you mentioned about the failure part. How can we get this entrepreneurial spirit back? See, I know we met last year with Peter Carl, and you were the business secretary right now. And if let's just say for a minute, because who knows who will be the prime minister? I don't know who will be, but what are some of the things? Because people like yourself and have been there and done it and have built and have gone, dealt with setbacks and have built companies. What would be the top 2 or 3 things you say they should be doing right now? Because I think a lot of people are wondering what's happening. I'd be intrigued actually as to what we can do to create that entrepreneurial spark and to get growth back and to get people feeling good about starting and running and being a business owner again.
Well, I think I've never known a time when entrepreneurship has been so how government could do so much to restrict entrepreneurial growth, because ultimately entrepreneurs take risks, they innovate, they create not just jobs, they create entire industries, they create markets, and it's those entrepreneurs that are creating the economic engine that funds everything else. So we've got a government that seems relentless on crushing an entrepreneurial spirit, and taxing it to death, when in fact what they should be doing is encouraging it and supporting risk taking and understanding that, an entrepreneur will work for years on no money, or, and just exist for a few years to build something, and then just be taxed to death on it. It's like, well, why take the risk? Why would I want to do that? And at the same time, in this country, we do have an entrepreneurial spirit. And I think the key to this is, if all you're doing is going into it just to make money, you'll probably fail, because it gets hard. And when it gets really, really hard and your back's against the wall, then it's easy to give up. And I often say that I think more entrepreneurs have failed because they've given up too early, rather than because of cash flow reasons. So, but if your purpose is big enough, if your goal is so big, so exciting, that you are going to be relentless and you're not going to stop until you achieve that goal, then that's where the real entrepreneurial spirit lives. And with that, you have got the determination to get over, around, under, through. It doesn't matter what the obstacles are. You will find a way. So I think, I really enjoy working with other entrepreneurs who are really purpose driven, and many of them adopt that model that I created: purpose, plan, execute. And the ones that are really successful are massively purpose driven.
It's such a good point, and a couple of points you mentioned there, which I look back, especially as a person that created a SaaS software business in '05. I remember back to when I took investment in for my business, and and actually I was focused on numbers. I was focused on bringing customers on board, not about the impact that we could make for them. And when you started
Yeah.
to take back and go, actually, what's the impact I'm doing? Going back to, I know you're creating a lot of content and doing a lot of things now. It's like, and I've done this for a number of years. It's like, actually, if I can help one person today, one person to make a sale, or to bring a piece of business in, or whatever, I've done my job. That's how I look at it. That's how I go to sleep at night, because I've made that person go, okay. And when you get messages from people that say you've helped me, it just, as I say to my friends that are very successful and wealthy, you can have all the cars in the world, you can have all the houses in the world, you can have all the watches in the world, but we're not Tutankhamun. We can't take it with us, right?
Yeah.
So actually, you've got to be able to leave an impact, and that's I guess the thing that you're doing and have done, and it's now sharing that story. But just to go back to that entrepreneurial thing around, and I think you're right about people being that sort of, not taxed, that just obviously taxed, but that spirit. One of the things that's doing it's changing that is also that people have got this desire around ideas. And one of the things I think a lot of the time is being able to be open. Have you? I'm guessing you've had other ideas of things you've done that haven't worked, right? And people are again afraid of things that, I can't, I've got to. And you hear sometimes a lot of business advice, you've got to do this and do this. Sometimes you just got to take flyers, right? Sometimes things don't work out. Sometimes
Yeah.
just it is the way it is.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a really good example of that. I've got a data and CRM business, and it's all built around a specific market. And when I launched that business, which is Insight Data, we used to supply data on a spreadsheet, and it was market intelligence data. And companies use this information to help target particular types of customers. And I woke up one day with this great idea about building a software platform on the top of it. And we launched it, and we've done 20 million in sales from that idea. At a similar time, I had the idea of building this online portal, a directory, but much more than a directory, like microsites for businesses. Launched that, and that flopped, and it just never took off. And both often serving the same market, same industries, both often equally viable and useful to clients. One took off and one didn't. So I think the key is just to keep trying and refining what you're doing, tweaking it, and not give up. Sooner or later, you're going to win.
Yeah, exactly. And great advice. Fantastic. But do conscious of time, but talk to us a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the business leader process of selling, because obviously you built Business Leader, and that's how Ben, I remember coming to speak to you, and we mentioned about Ollie before and the team that I had before. What prompted you? Because obviously you built this business, and as I understand it, was alongside, it was part of your Ascot group, but it was alongside Perplex. What made you in the end go, okay, well, I'll let that one go? Was it just a case of you'd achieve your goals of it? And talked about that process because selling a business, is an incredibly, you know, emotional thing for business owners, isn't it? Because you're selling your baby. And I know business leader was something that was very close to your heart.
Yeah.
So how did that whole thing feel to you when it happened?
Yeah. To be honest, it was a process because it wasn't the first time that I had been approached to sell the business. I'd had a couple of approaches before that. But I was very passionate about, well, I'm passionate about all my companies, but I was very, you don't have a favorite child. Um, so, I was very passionate about Business Leader, and Business Leader was quite a pivotal business because it opened up a network to me that I'd never experienced before. When you own a magazine and publishing business, which is so high profile that everybody wants to be in the front cover and everybody wants to be in your magazine, billionaires and millionaires and celebrities and ministers of government and just, everybody in that world want to be in your magazine, and you own that magazine. It's a very powerful position to be in. So, I had breakfast and lunch with, some of the most powerful people in not just in the UK, but in the US as well. So to sell that business was a big step, and I turned down some offers previously, but I had become friends with Richard Harpen, who had built and sold HomeServe, and he was one of our judges at our Business Leader Awards that we ran and Scale Up Awards. We then had dinner a couple of times. He spoke at some of my other events that we were involved in, and he contacted me one day and said, "Look, I want to come and see you. I'm interested in buying Business Leader." And I said, "Well, it's not for sale." And he said, "Well, let me come and see you. Let me explain what I want to do." And he during that process of being a judge and getting involved in that community, being in the magazine, we'd featured him in the magazine, and he loved it. And he came to me with a vision for the business. This is where I want to scale it. And I thought, you know what? There's so far I can take this business, but for a billionaire to acquire it and scale it, it's a different animal altogether. So as part of the deal, he asked me to stay on as chairman. I retained a stake in the business. So it was that opportunity for me to take what we had built and scale it at a level that was unprecedented. So that was the real attraction for me. It was less about the money, the exit. Although it was a good exit, it was less about that and more about the power of where we could take Business Leader.
So it was like seeing one of your child. It's like saying you're losing your child to university in America, but let them flourish and grow, basically, because they
Yeah,
can go achieve the dreams from there. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So look, I'm conscious of time, and I could talk to you. You're incredibly knowledgeable, and from an expertise perspective, you've got huge amounts of offer to offer. Talk to me a little bit about the future and you at the moment. 'Cause obviously, the book's coming out this year, and I know that you've got, and I'll put some links into you'll talk about into to where people can reach you online. But is that what's driving you now? Your passion is to obviously you've got businesses incredibly successful and people that run those businesses for you. What does the
yeah.
sort of future hold for you? Is it about sort of sharing this knowledge and sharing this expertise that you've built and growing that and helping make more impact and helping try and create this entrepreneurial spirit for people to have a go and to try things? Is that what the future looks like?
Exactly right, James. I'm really passionate about that. So, my core Ascot Group companies, they're doing what they're doing. They're growing. I've got a brilliant management team, a lovely bunch of people within there that really care about the business. So they're driving that forward. We will be looking at an exit PE or potentially IPO exit in 3 years. The property business has got a team that runs that, and then the bit in the middle for me is really passionately encouraging and supporting other entrepreneurs, and investing as well. So, I invest in, I've invested in a number of really great and exciting businesses, but I think the core of it is inspiring other entrepreneurs, sharing my story, helping them overcome the challenges that they have. And that's why, we talked about that old BMW. Right now, well, a year ago, I had the opportunity to buy that back, bizarrely, which I did. I had the car fully restored, and now it sits outside my office as a reminder that no matter how tough life gets and how bad it looks, there's always a new tomorrow. So quite often people will come to meet me and say, right, I've got this crisis in my business. How do I get over it? And we literally go and we sit in the car and we talk about it away from the hustle and bustle of the office, and we come up with a plan.
Love that. Sitting in the BMW with the leather seats and everything in place. Yeah, oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, it's so great that you're doing this, and I think that's why I wanted to get you on the podcast, because you've got so much to share and wisdom to give for others out there. To sort of finish, obviously, where can people reach? Firstly, I've got a couple of questions to finish off, but where can people reach you online? What's the best place for people to reach you? LinkedIn?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is my main port of call. My website is andrewscott.bio. And as you mentioned, my book is due out later this year. We're going through some edits at the minute. Slight difference of opinion with the publisher over who owns rights to what, but that's being ironed out. So that will come out later this year, and that really is about. It's a book really that encourages people that no matter what their background is, no matter what challenges they face, no matter whether they've got imposter syndrome, self-doubt, whatever it is, anybody can be anything they want to be if they really believe it and work towards it. So that's really what the book is about.
Some incredible advice there, and look, it's such wisdom, which I think is so true as well. And I'm so pleased that the things that you talked about here around the purpose and having a plan and delivering on those things. It's the things I repeat. And people who listen to the podcast regularly listen to, I repeat all the same thing. It's consistent. I also work. Consistency will win. When you've got a clear vision and mission and going, you're on that pathway. And as I always say to people, I'll do what I'm doing until I'm in a box, because it's what I want to do. And actually, you're not worried sometimes about where it takes you. You just focus on doing that aspect. So look, brilliant. So good to have you on the podcast, and thank you so much for giving up your time. I know you're a busy man. I've got lots of things on for people to. So obviously, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to put a couple of whenever the book comes out, we'll put a link into. Well, actually, I know you've got a waiting list on the website at the moment, so people can join the waiting list for the book, which is great, and we'll make sure people get a copy of that. If I might actually just do a bit of a competition and just sort of maybe put a few comments on the socials to get the first couple of copies as well, which I'm happy to sort out. So grateful to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for giving up your time so graciously. I really appreciate it. Really great to have you on board. So thank you so much for Andrew for doing that. So there was Andrew. There was Andrew Scott. Incredible business story, one that I think we can all learn from and take from, and just shows you that whatever you feel in life, whatever the situation is, don't give up and carry on at the other side. So Andrew's been on the podcast this week. If you've got any other people that you'd love me to interview on the podcast, love to have them on board, let me know. That's it for this week. Thanks as ever for watching and listening. It's my pleasure to share insights with you that help you achieve the success you want. So until next week, stay safe and see you then.